Hey, this is Ryan of Happy Healthy Vegan. So over the past week or two, many of you guys have asked me to take a look at this study that the mainstream news media has been more than happy to report about how vegetarian diets have been linked to poorer health and a lower quality of life. So here is the study in question entitled The Association Between Eating Behaviors and Various Health Parameters, a Matched Sample Study. And here's this study's conclusion that the mainstream media has been running with, saying that a vegetarian diet is associated with poorer health, higher incidences of cancer, allergies, and mental health disorders, and a higher need for health care and a poorer quality of life. Wait, did these researchers just say that vegetarian diets are associated with a higher incidence of cancer? Because if so, this goes pretty much against all the prior research into this subject matter. In fact, these very researchers make note of this in the review of the prior research. They say a vegetarian diet has been associated with lower incidence of certain cancers. So this is a groundbreaking study, supposedly. So fortunately for the study's credibility, the authors said there were no stated conflicts of interest or conflicted sources of funding, or said no sources of funding for that matter, so I guess that's good. Anyway, let's get down to what this study is. Its data set comes from a survey that the Austrian government did way back in 2006 and 2007. And the study that these particular researchers did is known in epidemiology as a cross-sectional study. It's kind of weak. It's just a snapshot in time. They just went back to 2006 and 7 and found these people's answers to questions that they gave about what they were doing right then and there on that particular day that they took the survey. There's no data about what kinds of diets the subjects were doing prior to that snapshot day and how long they stayed on the diets that they were on that one particular day. So basically, the worst problem about a cross-sectional study is that there's no causality. You cannot determine causality. You can just merely make associations, but determining causality is fundamentally flawed because there can be reverse causality, as we'll talk about in a second. So way back in 2006, 2007, the Austrian government conducted a survey and they asked people, without giving them any clear definition of what these categories mean, they asked these people whether they considered their diet to be vegan, vegetarian including milk and or eggs, vegetarian including fish and or milk and eggs, and then carnivorous but rich in fruits and vegetables, carnivorous but less rich in meat, and carnivorous rich in meat. Not surprisingly, very few people in this survey identify themselves as vegan or vegetarian. As you'll see here, only 0.2% consider themselves to be vegan, 0.8% consider themselves to be true vegetarian, and 1.2% of them consider themselves to be this odd category of vegetarians who eat fish. So what the researchers did, since there are so few of these non-meat eating people, is that the researchers grouped them all together into one vegetarian group, which I find to be quite odd because if you look at the classical definitions of vegetarian, they do not eat fish. Yet the largest group here of this vegetarian group are fish eaters. They outnumber the vegans and the non-fish eating vegetarians combined. So this is how the researchers determined the diet type. Well, let's get to how they determined health and disease here. So back to this Austrian survey, all people did was answer on a scale of 1 to 5 how their self-perceived health was. And as far as being impaired, a scale of 1 to 3. And regarding 18 specific diseases such as heart attack and cancers, people just checked off a box, either present or absent. And remember, these researchers concluded that vegetarians have a poor quality of life. How did they measure that? Well, they used a short version of an established questionnaire assessing 4 domains of physical, psychological health, social relationships, and environment. So once they crunched all the numbers, the researchers found certain things about vegetarians, such as they had a lower body mass index compared to the other 3 carnivorous groups, and also vegetarians drink less alcohol. Well, that's not an exciting conclusion at all. If that were it, I'm sure this paper never would have had its conclusions published in major media. So what the researchers did was for every person in this loose vegetarian group, they matched them up with a person in one of those 3 meat-eating groups to make some further comparisons. And here's where they got their startling conclusions. So looking at health and disease, the vegetarians tended to self-report worse levels of health and higher levels of impairment. And particularly now looking at disease, vegetarians fared worse in 3 particular areas. Allergies, 31% prevalence compared to about 17 and 20% in the carnivorous groups. Cancer was the most striking one to me, 5% prevalence compared to about 1 to 3%. And mental illness, particularly anxiety and depression, 9% compared to 4 to 5%. And they also found that vegetarians had a self-reported lower quality of life in the domains of physical health and environment compared to those on a carnivorous diet. So therefore, the researchers conclude that the results show that a vegetarian diet is associated with poorer health, particularly higher incidences of cancer, allergies, and mental health disorders, and have a lower quality of life. And they suggest that public health programs are needed to reduce the health risk due to nutritional factors, which I find quite odd because there were no nutritional factors tested in this study other than people answering if their diet was vegetarian or not. So despite the media headlines, this Austrian cross-sectional survey and the study done upon its data provide no proof that vegetarians and people following vegan diets are in poorer health than those who are meat eaters. And these are not my words. This comes straight from the NHS, who felt that this study was so poor and being so misrepresented by the mainstream media that they wrote their own rebuttal to it. So let's take a quick look at a few key points from what the NHS said here in this article. They brought up the problem of this being a cross-sectional study and the potential problem for reverse causality, as I hinted upon earlier. NHS says the cross-sectional study cannot prove cause and effect, and that the dietary pattern, such as vegan, vegetarian, or meat eater, is responsible for any of these self-reported differences, such as having cancer or having poorer quality of life. In fact, it is possible that the association seen could be due to reverse causality. That is, people with an existing health problems, like say cancer, might have switched to a vegetarian diet that may be perceived to be more healthy. And again, this is in line with what the authors said in the review of the literature, that vegetarian diets have been associated with lower incidence of many diseases, including cancer. So it's quite reasonable that people who have cancer, have been diagnosed with cancer, would have switched their diets to something that doesn't involve eating meat. And if you read through the fine print of the study, the authors are aware of this problem, and they said so themselves, even though the major media didn't pick up on this bit, but it says right here, therefore, no statements can be made whether the poor health in vegetarians in our study is caused by their dietary habit or if they consume this form of diet due to their poor health status. And they also say that, moreover, we cannot give any information regarding the long-term consequences of a special diet, such as vegan or vegetarian, nor concerning mortality rates. So in other words, they're saying they can make absolutely no predictions about how people's health will play out in the long term based on this study. Remember, it's cross-sectional, it's just a snapshot in time. The NHS also takes issue with how these researchers determined the presence of disease in these subjects. As they say, the presence of these 18 specific diseases does not seem to have been medically verified and seems to have just been classed as being present or absent without having any idea of what this means. For example, whether the person actually met diagnostic criteria, how long they had it, how severe it was, and whether it was even being treated. Another problem about concluding too much from the study is that all its people were from Austria, and for all we know, people in Austria may have particularly unique health, dietary, and lifestyle habits that are not present in those from other countries. Another problem I noticed from this study that no one else pointed out is that it was from 2006 and 2007, and access to good, high-quality information on the internet about plant-based diets was pretty much non-existent back then. But compared to now, it's a completely different world. So if the study were to have been done now, with Austrians or otherwise, you might get completely different results. So please let me know down in the comments if anyone tried to forward this story to you in an attempt to disprove your vegan diet. Ha ha, take that, vegans!
The doctor said meat's healthy for me.
As I said, there's so many reasons why this does not apply to vegans, mainly because only 0.2% of the people studied in this study were vegans, and more people in this vegetarian group ate meat in the form of fish than those who didn't. So it was really a bizarre definition of vegetarianism, and for all the cross-sectional study problems that we talked about here, the study really does not do anything to gainsay. That means speak badly of the healthful benefits of a plant-based diet. So anyway, let me know down below, hit like if you got some of this video, and let me know that you like to see more of these scientific rebuttal videos. And until next time, guys, remember, it doesn't suck being vegan.
Changing your mind again. You've got me spinning circles, spinning round and round, spinning till I'm dizzy, falling to the ground. You've got me spinning circles round